In the entire Hebrew Bible, there is only one non-Jewish person who is called the Messiah, the anointed one chosen by God to save his people. That person is not a Hebrew. He is not even a believer in the Jewish God. He is a Persian king. His name is Cyrus the Great, and the story of why he received that title tells us something profound about power, about religion, and about what it actually takes to hold a diverse world together. To understand why Cyrus matters, you need to understand the world he stepped into. Mesopotamia, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now Iraq, was the center of the ancient world. It was where writing was invented, where the first cities arose, where the first empires were built. It was also, for thousands of years, a place of almost constant violent competition. Empire after empire rose and fell in Mesopotamia. The Akkadians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the pattern was always the same. You conquer, you subjugate, you parade your defeated enemies through the streets, you humiliate them, you make them fear you. And then, when your back is turned, the next wave of ambitious people from the borderlands sweeps in and does the same to you. By around 600 BC, three major powers were more or less keeping each other in check. The Lydians in what is now Turkey, the Babylonians in Mesopotamia, and the Maids in what is now northwestern Iran. None of them was strong enough to destroy the others, and then Cyrus arrived. Cyrus was king of a people called the Persians, who were descended from the Yamnaya migrations we covered in an earlier episode. They were based in what is now southwestern Iran, not as wealthy or powerful as the Big Three. But Cyrus had something none of the others had, a completely different theory of power. He conquered the Maids first, not through overwhelming force alone, but through clever alliances and military skill. Then the king of the Lydians, a man named Croesus, saw an opportunity and attacked. Cyrus defeated him too. Now here is where it gets interesting. In Mesopotamian tradition, when you conquered an enemy king, you paraded him publicly, humiliated him, and eventually executed him as a demonstration of your god's superiority over his. It was brutal and it worked in the short term. Fear was the currency of power. Cyrus did something completely different. He pardoned Croesus. He made him an advisor. He showed mercy. This was not weakness, it was a calculation, because what Cyrus had figured out is that ruling through fear creates a permanent opposition. Every person you humiliate becomes a potential enemy. Every city you loot becomes a city that will rebel when you are stretched thin. The Mesopotamian system of empire was self-defeating because it required perpetual violence just to maintain itself. What Cyrus wanted instead was something more sustainable. The Babylonian Empire was the next target, and also the last major power standing in Mesopotamia. But Babylon was already torn apart from within. The king and the priesthood were at war with each other, over whose religious authority was supreme. Under normal circumstances, facing a common external threat, they would have united. But they had heard what happened to Croesus, and they had heard what Cyrus was like. So the nobility of Babylon struck a deal with Cyrus and let him walk in without a major battle. Cyrus later described this as his greatest conquest, precisely because he achieved it not through slaughter, but through his reputation for mercy. He then did something even more radical. He freed the Jewish people. The Jews had been in Babylonian captivity for roughly 70 years, taken from Judea after the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in Jerusalem in 586 BC. They had survived in exile, holding on to their identity, their stories, and their God. Now Cyrus released them, allowed them to return to Jerusalem, and personally sponsored the rebuilding of their temple. In the Jewish tradition, the person who does this, who releases God's people from captivity and allows them to return home, is supposed to be the Messiah. And here is this Persian king fulfilling exactly that role. The Jews called him Messiah, not metaphorically, literally, in the scriptures. the only foreign king ever to receive that title. So what was Cyrus actually doing? He was practicing what political scientists would much later call divide and rule. Not in the cynical manipulative sense, but in a structural sense. He recognized that every society has internal factions, different groups with different interests, different religions, different histories. The old way was to pick the dominant faction and brutally suppress all the others. Cyrus's insight was the opposite. Let every group keep its identity. Let them practice their religion. Let them run their own affairs locally, and use the empire as the neutral force that prevents any one group from destroying the others. You offer something valuable, security, prosperity, trade, and in return you ask for loyalty and taxes, not conformity. What he built was not quite an empire in the old sense. It was closer to a federation, a system where diverse peoples chose to participate because participation genuinely benefited them. Persian roads connected distant regions and made trade easier. Persian administrators maintained order without imposing Persian religion. The famous Persian postal system created communication across vast distances that had never been possible before. And to hold the administrative class together, the people who actually ran this federation, Persia had a state religion called Zoroastrianism, which was at this point arguably the most sophisticated religion in the world. Zoroastrianism described history as a cosmic battle between a god of light and creation and a force of darkness and chaos. Crucially, it gave humans free will. We could choose which side to be on. Choosing good, choosing truth, meant maintaining your integrity as an administrator. It was a system built on the idea that individual moral choice mattered in a cosmic sense. The fusion of Zoroastrian ideas with Jewish ideas during the Babylonian exile produced something entirely new: the Jewish concept of history as a line moving toward a final redemption, the idea of a cosmic battle between good and evil, angels and demons as distinct beings with specific roles, a final judgment, a resurrection. All of these ideas, so central to Christianity and Islam later, were born from this collision between Zoroastrianism and Judaism in the Persian period. Cyrus the Great died around 530 BC. The Persian Empire he built lasted for 2 centuries and became the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. At its peak, it stretched from Greece to modern-day Pakistan. Alexander the Great, who conquered Persia in the 330s BC, was so impressed by Cyrus that when he found the tomb had been desecrated, he stopped his campaign to restore it. The man who conquered the known world paused to pay his respects to a ruler from 2 centuries earlier. That is how lasting a reputation Cyrus built. But his deeper legacy is the set of ideas he introduced, that power can be sustained through consent rather than fear, that diversity is a strength rather than a threat, and that a great ruler's job is to create conditions for flourishing rather than conditions for obedience. The ancient world spent most of its history proving that the only way to hold an empire together was through violence and terror. Empire after empire built itself on that premise and eventually collapsed because of it. Cyrus demonstrated another possibility, one built on trust, mercy, and the recognition that different peoples with different beliefs could coexist within a shared structure if that structure genuinely served their interests. He was not perfect, no ruler is, and his successors did not always maintain what he built. But the idea he embodied was revolutionary enough that 3,000 years later, people still call him the greatest ruler in human history. And the people he freed from captivity, who went home, rebuilt their temple, and began to write and assemble what we now call the Hebrew Bible, those people remembered him forever as the one chosen by God to save them. Messiah, that is a title that means something, even when it is given to someone from completely outside your tradition. The story of what happened to Jewish identity and to the ideas that emerged from the Babylonian exile and the Persian period is exactly what drives the next major chapter in the history of civilization.